Ian, thanks so much for being part of this call.
My
Tell me a
pleasure.
little bit about the people that are dealing with career change post COVID-19 and what you're doing to help them solve some of the things that they're struggling with.
The whole notion of career change as a result of COVID is quite a phenomenon, and globally. There was one study done that said almost 40% of people were considering a career change as a result of COVID. So it's made everybody stop, look and listen to themselves to see am I doing what I really want to do? So what I'm finding in my practice is that most of my clients are actually dealing with that issue themselves. It's like, is this what I really want to do? And when they start to consider that, there's a really weird phenomenon that happens because these are all senior people. They're all very accomplished in their careers. And as they consider doing something different, they lose their confidence. They've been in their current position for so long that they can do it with both hands tied behind their back and their eyes closed. But because they've become so competent in their current position, they lose sight of what else they can do. And they lose sight of the fact that their skills are transferable. Now you can tell them that, but that's just logic. This is an emotional thing that they're dealing with. The fact that they lose their confidence and wonder, can I do anything else? So what I'm also finding with most of my clients who are considering a career change is they don't know if they want to be an employee or if they want to be an entrepreneur. So I'll give you an example of one of my clients, just in very generic terms, so that I'm not betraying any confidences, but of the situation that this person is in. He's been an entrepreneur for a long time, and he has a really cool idea for a business. But he also needs income. He's the primary breadwinner in the family. So he needs income. So rather than say, let's focus on being an entrepreneur or let's focus on getting a job, let's do both. Let's define what kind of business, what kind of consultant you would be strongest as. And if you get hired, what kind of role do you want to play in a company? Two other questions that are really important is it doesn't matter which of those two things you decide to do, whether you're going to be an employee doing this or a consultant doing this, how are you going to do it? What's your methodology? Because if you're just going to walk in and say, oh, I make an assessment of the situation and I make a custom-made program just for you, no one's going to buy that vagueness, right? So, and then the final question we have to ask, actually, the first question we have to ask is, who are you? Because whatever we create has to be an extension of you. It has to be relevant to you. It has to resonate with you. It has to inspire you. So if we don't know who you are, how can we answer those questions? So this person, what we did is we defined if he was going to be a consultant, what area was he going to work in? And as it turned out, the job, well, not surprisingly, the job that we contemplated was very similar. And that was actually very convenient. It's wonderful the way it worked out. And it probably would always work out that way. But the thing is that he's got a skill set. We defined a methodology for that skill set. We figured out who he is. And then we said, okay, go make that happen. And you can either make it happen as an employee or as a consultant. Yeah. But it's the same thing in both situations. So he has the flexibility to do it either way. Goes out for a job interview and someone says, yeah, I want to hire you for my senior leadership team. Awesome. Or if he says, if he or she says, you can do this as a consultant? Great. I'll hire you on as a consultant to do this. Lots of flexibility. So, that's the work that we did with this client. And then as a final step, because one of his tracks was to go get a career, he needs a resume. And for any of us who have gone through stacks of resumes, you know how life-sucking a prospect, or a process that is. Because you lift one up and you go, right? You lift the next one up and it looks the same. The next one looks the same. And they've all got that banal statement at the top. I want to find a company that will leverage my skills and passions and blah, blah, blah. And if I read one more of those. So we had to, as part of this process, design a whole new resume. And it's one page. And the reason that we designed a new resume is because there's an important principle in sales. It was fundamental to my last business, Blueprint. And that rule is that what customers are buying is fundamentally different than what you're selling. 99% of companies don't know this. And for anybody watching this video, if there's only one thing you take away, take that away. What customers are buying is fundamentally different than what you're selling. So what we did is we created the resume from the perspective of what does the reader need to read, not what do I want to tell the reader about who I am. And when you look at a resume that way, you flip it 180 degrees and you design it from the perspective of the reader and what the reader needs in order to say, I want to interview that person. Because that's the objective of a resume. Get an interview. Then you write a very different resume. So we redefined what a resume is. And I've used that with a bunch of different clients now. So that's the story of how I work with clients now who are considering a career change. First thing is, who are you, right? And then what are we going to produce coming out of that? Do you want to create a business? Do you want to get a different job? Do you want to contemplate both? No problem. But we got to define what those things are so that you are crystal clear when you go out into the marketplace, both what you want and how to communicate to people exactly what you want and who you are.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I want to tell you why I love, Ian, I want to tell you why I love you doing this, if I may.
Thank you, by the way.
You're welcome. So I know one resume writer who I've introduced you to, and I find that a lot of resume writers will kind of just take your existing resume and refresh it, but they're not approaching it from a business perspective, where how you look at resumes differently is you go, I don't want a 15-page resume or 3-page resume at 8-inch font. Give me a 1-page resume. That by itself is a leg up. The part where, from my experience of working with you, the part that I love about the work you do is and you've never used these words with me, these are words I'm kind of inserting or manufacturing myself. You create a resume based by a person's core values. And I find that that resume is and you didn't use these words, you use the word extension of who you are.
Right.
But a resume that's based on somebody's core values will attract employers or consulting gigs where the buyer is buying that core value. That is what I will label or say $1 million resume. That is what you didn't say any of these things, but if people took that approach, I've seen lots of surveys of employees not being happy at work, or out being down or whatever it is. I think getting the resume, if you get the resume thing right, you will attract employers or consulting opportunities that's aligned with your core values, and therefore you're not going to have the boredom issue or the mismanagement of company issue as much or things like that, because you're aligning people with their core values. But it starts with getting the resume right. If you get the resume right, everything else will be a domino effect. You get the resume wrong, everything else will be a domino effect.
Yeah, as we talk about resume, Tamer, people think of a resume as, oh, that piece of paper that you send off to an employer.
Yeah.
It is that to a degree, because the potential employer is going to look at it. They're going to spend 30 seconds scanning it and then make their decision about whether they're going to invite you in or not. But the thing about a resume, in order to get a resume right, there's all the backfill you've got to do in getting your story, right? Now, if you're going to write a traditional resume, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do that hard work. But you're going to be another piece of paper in the pile. If you don't, if you want to be on the short list, you have to do the work to figure out who you are. So figuring out who you are at your core, what Simon Sinek would call your why or your purpose, you were calling it core values, right?
Yeah.
Has all sorts of different names.
Sure.
But figuring out who you are at your core is what you need to do in order to get your story right. And then your story has to be formatted into a resume. And when you do those 3 steps properly, you end up with a 1-page resume that when, the person is sorting through it on their desk and they come to yours, they go, whoa, first of all, it looks different. And now it's, wow, that's a powerful statement. That's a powerful point. That's a powerful point. And that's what happens. So just because in this part of the conversation we're talking about resumes, which seems like a small tactic, it actually has a lot behind it that if you don't get that right, you end up with a generic resume.
100%. Ian, from your experience, why do people need a coach? Why do people need somebody like you to guide them through the conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tamer, because most people don't have a coach. Most people don't think they need a coach. And so why do you need a coach is a great question. And my answer is sort of 2 parts. The first part is that, especially when you get up into the senior ranks of business, you are now competing at the highest level of business. The expectations of you, if you're on the senior leadership team or you're a CEO or you're running your own business, then the expectations of you are enormous. Compounding that, you've probably got a pretty good salary, which probably means it's pretty common for executives to know that they're important and do a good job, but am I really earning my money?
Right.
There's a lot of guilt around that. Right? Executive guilt because you're making a ton of money, and am I really pulling my weight? Right? So my point about this is you're at the very senior level of business when you're on a senior leadership team. Look at the other areas in life where people are at the very senior level. Major League Baseball, NHL hockey, NFL football, European League soccer, the top musicians in the world. If you saw that movie, Seymour in Introduction, Seymour Bernstein was a virtuoso pianist who, when he played the Goldberg variations, I've got that right, don't I? Goldberg variations box, When he played those at Carnegie Hall in the 60s, the New York Times basically said he was the second coming. And what did he do as a result? He retired. He wasn't interested in performing. And what he became was a piano coach for virtuosos. So people who are already at the virtuoso level, he trains them, he coaches them. And so professional sport, professional music, professional whatever, if you want to get from 1.0 to 2.0 at the senior level of whatever you're competing in, you need a coach for that. You need a different perspective. You need someone who has a methodology that can move you up. And because most people can't do it on their own. Show me a professional athlete that doesn't have a coach.
Sure. And then Ian, so I've known you now for a few years, and one of the things that I love about your work and your experience, if I may say so, is um, you get people into what I call clarity.
It's the name of my
You
company.
figure that if I, as a human, yeah, your company, if you can get me as a human being clear or get me to clarity, I can, I I have the car, I have the engine, I have the gas in the car, but the minute you get me clear, I can just press the power button and zoom, I go. Tell me a little bit about clarity. What are some questions that people should be asking themselves when they go through this post-COVID career change that would help them get clarity?
Let me talk about the opposite of clarity to lead into clarity, right? So lack of clarity, what does it cause? It causes anxiety, right?
Mm-hmm.
You feel stress in some form or another. It could be mild, could be severe. But when you're feeling that stress, you know, Tamor, you and I know that as loss of power, right?
Yep.
So when you feel that stress, it's about a situation. It's because there's something hidden from you. And if that was revealed, and so now you have clarity, think about situations that you've handled where you did have tremendous clarity, right? You strode into that situation confidently. You expressed your point of view or managed the situation however, but you did it with full confidence and full power because you were clear. And when you're not clear, when you don't have clarity, you have hesitation, you have anxiety, you have uncertainty, you have all these things that get in your way.
Right.
So the value of clarity is confidence. And the value of confidence is action. And that at the end of the day is what a coach is designed to do, is to get you into action. And you are not in action for one of two reasons. Either there are external things that are acting as barriers to you, or there are internal things that are acting as barriers to you. And either way, getting clarity around those things will give you the confidence to then act boldly.
I love it. I love it. Ian, how do people get hold of you? If they want to get more information or hire you, or maybe do a sample session with you first before they fully hire you, or whatever the deal is, how do people get hold of you?
So my website is just my last name .coach, CHAMANDY.coach. And so that's probably, the easiest way to make initial contact with me. Check out my website. It's very brief. And, my email address is there and that sort of thing. So that's the best way to do it. The other thing that you may want to check out is the website, which is still up, of my previous business, which is a company called Blueprint. So a lot of what I've talked to you about today for individuals, I've been doing for the last 15 years for companies. The web address there is the number 7 words.biz. That's the number 7 words.biz. What it describes there is a whole methodology for defining who you are as a company, right? And what I do in my coaching business, and I mentioned this right at the top, is one of the questions that we've got to answer is, who are you? Right. And we have to answer that in 7 words or less. That's the rule that we imposed at Blueprint. A company has to define who it is, or as Simon Sinek would say, what your why is. You got to define it in 7 words or less. Then you can figure out, once you have that expression of who you are, is figure out how it guides how you operate and how it guides how you communicate. Right? So this mantra becomes a guide for your life. And so I do all the stuff that every coach does, right? Get barriers out of your way, get you out of your own way. But what I also do that other coaches don't do, because they don't have that 15-year history with Blueprint, is I help you define who you are in 7 words or less. And
Uh,
that is a tremendous filter, a very powerful filter for you to go through life,
I agree with you.
evaluating life. So my filter is from confusion to clarity. It was back when I was with Blueprint, and it is now as a coach. Except instead of taking a company from confusion to clarity, I'm taking individuals from confusion to clarity.
For sure. And I can testify from somebody who's gone through your work that I've come to, I'm the dividing rod. I am the 5 reasons why somebody should choose me, the ability for me to get capital, far more capital than banks could do, transparency, competency, like all that stuff. And so I can testify that not only are you good at creating clarity, but you bring something to the table that obviously is a big missing for other people, which is, now let me help you why people should choose you in 7 words or less. I love it. Thank you.
Well, yeah, the cool thing about our conversations is that, if a company is flush, it can go to the bank and get a loan, right? That's not most businesses. So they can't get loans from banks. And so there you are to help any one of those businesses. But that money can't be found, at a branch on the corner.
Right.
That money is essentially hidden from most people because they don't know the world of finance the way you know it. And so that's how we came up with the divining rod metaphor for your business. And the beautiful thing about having a metaphor for what you do is that there is pre-understood definition around that metaphor, right? A divining rod technically is a stick that you hold to find water in the desert. But metaphorically, it is an ability to find what's hidden. And that's what you do for capital to help companies grow.
Right.
You help them find hidden financing.
Right.
And the divining rod is a beautiful metaphor for that.
Love it. Thank you so much. Ian, thanks so much for your time. And I thank you for contributing to a career post-COVID-19.
Thank you very much for interviewing me.